Judge Greg Mathis says a fellow judge's public statement in the Nolan Wells case deserves zero credibility. Here's exactly why he says that, in his own words.
Did you hear about how Warren Hudson, his stepmom, is a judge? And I think she came out with a statement and she doubled down that, Nolan, he chose to stay behind at the island.
Correct. And I guess it's just as, that's why it gives me such leniency to discuss, what I believe to be the case. If another judge who was his mother and certainly biased had the, tenacity to issue a press release confirming her beliefs in what her son said, which is bias in and of itself. Not one time have I ever accepted as evidence or solid testimony when someone tells me, well, I went over it with my mother and she can tell you. I got a letter from my mother. I got some evidence from my mother. Yeah, I know your mother. I got some evidence from my wife. Yeah, I know your wife gonna tell you what you want me. You're gonna tell me what your wife want me to tell you. Yeah, I know you do. But it's totally discounted because of the bias that is innate in their relationship. So, mother, you're a judge, you're a lawyer, whatever. The innate part of that is that they have a mother-son bond, and nothing penetrates that, not even the law. Some of us might have seen this series called Your Honor, where the sitting judge, his son killed someone accidentally, and that sitting judge harbored his son, protected his son, even breaking the law himself to do it. So certainly, just because his mother's a judge and sticks up for him doesn't make any difference than if she was a sister in the hood with 8 kids trying to make it on her own. Same difference. Mother-son bond. That's it. That's the only credibility I give to her letter. I think I should get a little more credibility. I don't know anybody in it.
Yeah, she got a lot of backlash. A lot of people was accusing her of using her position to defend her stepson. So, yeah, she got a lot of backlash. But it does make you think, do she know more than everybody else? I mean, I'm sure he giving her more information than we all know, so.
Now, I just think it's a mother-son bond, and I wouldn't think that she would. Then again, the show I'm talking about, Your Honor, he was conspiring with his son to keep him out of trouble. So there's been, and we say sometimes, does art follow culture, or does art follow society, or does society follow art? So in the case of art, we had a show where a judge whose son committed murder, he conspired with his son to protect him from murder. Well, in real life, we have here a judge who has issued a statement on behalf of her son, who was being discussed regarding the disappearance of someone. And so, yeah, I can't speak too fast about what a judge would do with regard to conspiring to protect a criminal act of their child. Would I do it? Yeah, I guess we're really getting down to those issues of the heart, to be quite frank. Not issues of your profession, issues of the heart. Because I could think of a circumstance or two that I would defend my son had he been wrong. So that's why I give it no credibility. But go ahead.
That's Judge Greg Mathis, giving zero credibility to a statement from another sitting judge. Not because he thinks she's lying, because he thinks it's structurally impossible for her not to be biased. That's a real argument, made by someone with an actual legal background, and it deserves to be taken seriously rather than dismissed. But it also deserves to be checked against what Judge Cole's statement actually said, what she actually did, and what happened to her afterward, because a lot of that context didn't make it into those 4 minutes, and without it, this clip can land very differently than it should. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, subscribe, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Let's go through this carefully. Strip away the television reference for a second, because I want to make sure his actual legal point gets a fair hearing before we get into the part that's going to generate the most reaction. Mathis's core claim is this: testimony filtered through a close family relationship, a mother vouching for her son, a wife vouching for her husband, carries no independent evidentiary weight, regardless of the person's profession or credentials. A judge is still a mother, a lawyer is still a wife. The professional title doesn't dissolve the personal bond, and the personal bond, in his framing, makes objective testimony essentially impossible.
He's explicit that this isn't about credentials at all. He says a mother defending her son gets the same amount of credibility from him whether she's a sitting judge or, in his words, a sister in the hood with 8 kids trying to make it on their own. Same bond, same discount, regardless of anyone's job title.
That's actually a coherent, defensible position, and it's worth acknowledging why. In courtrooms, this exact principle shows up constantly. Interested witness instructions exist because juries are routinely told to weigh testimony from a witness with a personal stake in the outcome differently than testimony from a disinterested third party. A parent's account of their child's actions, offered on that child's behalf, is treated with more scrutiny in almost every legal system for exactly the reason Mathis describes. He's not inventing a new standard. He's applying an old one to a new situation. Where it gets more complicated is what he's applying that standard to. Because Judge Cole's public statement isn't one single thing. It's actually several different claims bundled together, and they don't all carry the same evidentiary weight or deserve the same discount. Here's what got left out of the clip, and it matters for evaluating how much this specific critique actually applies. Judge Ashlee Cole's public statement, posted in early July, contained a few distinct categories of information. First, a factual claim about her own family, that she and her husband were not physically present on Horn Island on July 4th. That's not a claim about what Nolan did, it's a claim about where she herself was, which she's in a direct position to know firsthand, with no mother-son bias problem attached to it at all. Second, a claim about process, that Warren was interviewed by the Jackson County Sheriff's Department and cooperated fully with investigators. That's a factual claim about an institutional interaction, one that's independently verifiable by the Sheriff's Department itself. It's not simply her words standing alone. Third, and this is the part Mathis's critique actually applies to most directly, her relaying of Warren's own account, that he last saw Nolan around 3 p.m., that the group left around 4:30 due to the bilge pump failure, and that Nolan made his own choice to stay behind. This is exactly the kind of second-hand, family-filtered testimony Mathis is describing. She wasn't there. She's repeating what her stepson told her, in public, in defense of him. So here's the more precise way to frame this. Mathis's bias critique is genuinely well aimed at part of what Cole said, and much less applicable to other parts of it. Treating the entire statement as a single, undifferentiated block, deserving zero credibility across the board, collapses 3 different kinds of claims into one, when only one of them actually fits the bias problem he's describing. Now, the part of this clip that's going to generate the most attention, and the part where I want to be the most precise, because it's very easy to hear this wrong. Mathis references the Showtime series, Your Honor, a fictional drama where a sitting judge actively conspires with his son and breaks the law himself to protect him after his son commits a crime. Mathis raises the question of whether art imitates life or life imitates art, and says he can't speak too fast about what a real judge might do to protect their own child. I want to be extremely clear about what this is and isn't, because the difference matters enormously. Mathis is not claiming Judge Cole broke any law. He is not claiming she obstructed an investigation, tampered with evidence, or did anything beyond issue a public statement. What he's doing is raising a hypothetical about human nature in general, using a fictional TV plot to illustrate a psychological point about how far a parent's protective instinct can theoretically go, and then, notably, turning that same question back on himself. He says directly that he can imagine circumstances where he'd defend his own son even if his son had done something wrong. That last part is actually the most honest moment in the clip, and it's worth not losing it in the more provocative TV comparison. Mathis isn't accusing Cole of anything specific. He's making a broader point about the limits of impartiality when your own child is involved, and admitting he's not sure he'd be any different in her position. But here's why the distinction between raising a hypothetical about human nature and comparing a real person to a TV character who commits crimes to protect his son matters so much, especially in a case this charged. Even when a comparison is framed as speculative, pairing a real, named, identifiable judge's name with a fictional storyline about judicial corruption and cover-up creates an association in a viewer's mind that a purely verbal disclaimer doesn't fully erase. Someone who watches this clip and walks away with, the judge in Nolan's case is being compared to a criminal conspiracy TV judge, has absorbed something stronger than what Mathis technically said. That's not a reason to avoid covering the clip. It's a reason to be precise, on our end, about exactly what was and wasn't claimed, which is exactly what we're doing right now. To date, there is no public evidence from any source that Judge Cole did anything beyond post a public statement defending her stepson's account. No allegation of obstruction, no allegation of evidence tampering, no formal complaint against her judicial conduct connected to this case that's been made public. The Your Honor comparison is speculation about what a parent theoretically might do, not a claim about what this specific parent actually did. There's one more piece of this worth pulling out on its own, because I think it's actually the sharpest part of the whole segment, separate from the TV comparison. Mathis notes that Cole received significant public backlash for using her position to defend her stepson, and then asks a genuinely interesting question: does that backlash mean she knows more than everyone else? His reasoning is that Warren likely told her more than what's been made public, simply because she's his stepmother and he'd naturally share more with her than with a stranger or an investigator on a first interview. This cuts in two directions at once, and it's worth naming both. On one hand, it's a fair observation. Family members frequently do have more complete information than the public record reflects, precisely because people tend to be more candid with people they trust. On the other hand, she probably knows more than she said publicly, is true of almost every family member connected to almost every case like this. It's not a specific red flag about Cole. It's a generic feature of how information moves through families during a crisis. Everyone close to this case, including people on every side of it, almost certainly knows more than what's been made public. That's not suspicious on its own. It's just what privacy and an active investigation look like from the outside. Here's the context that matters most, and it's the part that didn't make it into the 4 minutes you just heard. Judge Cole didn't just make one statement and go quiet. Days after her original post, she returned to social media specifically to show her followers the volume of threats and hostile messages she and her family had received in response to defending her stepson. That thread of threats is what ultimately led federal investigators to identify and arrest a man on a federal threats charge, a case we've covered in detail on this channel. That doesn't settle the bias question Mathis raises. A judge can be genuinely, sincerely biased on her stepson's behalf and also be a real target of serious, credible threats at the same time. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive, and neither cancels the other out. But it's relevant context for understanding what happened to her after she spoke, and it's part of why we think it's worth including here rather than treating her statement in isolation, the way this clip does. I want to land this the same way we try to land every disputed claim in this case, by being precise about what's actually being argued, rather than flattening it into, he's right, or he's out of line. Mathis's underlying legal principle, that testimony filtered through a close family bond, deserves independent scrutiny, regardless of the person's professional title, is a real, defensible standard, used constantly in actual courtrooms. Applying it to the part of Cole's statement that relays Warren's own account is a completely fair thing to do. Applying that same zero credibility standard to every part of her statement, including the parts that are independently verifiable or don't depend on her relationship to Warren at all, stretches the argument further than the reasoning actually supports. The Your Honor comparison is where the most caution is warranted. It's framed as speculation about human nature, not an accusation, and Mathis's own admission that he might do the same thing in her position makes clear he's raising a question about parents generally, not making a specific claim about this parent. But pairing a real judge's name with a fictional story about a judge who breaks the law to protect his son is the kind of association that travels further and lands harder than the speculative framing around it, and it deserves to be understood exactly as speculative, nothing more, every time it comes up. What's actually confirmed, Judge Cole posted a public statement relaying her stepson's account of July 4th. She received serious backlash and documented threats afterward, serious enough to lead to a federal arrest. What's not confirmed, any wrongdoing on her part, any evidence she withheld information, or any parallel between her actual conduct and a fictional television plot. Here's where this leaves us. A real legal principle, applied to a real disputed statement, by someone with genuine credentials to make that argument, sitting right next to a speculative TV comparison that, if taken too literally, implies something about a real person that hasn't been established at all. Both things can exist in the same 4 minutes. Our job isn't to tell you Mathis is right or wrong about how much weight to give Judge Cole's statement. Reasonable people, including actual legal professionals, disagree on exactly how much bias discount to apply to interested testimony, and that's a legitimate ongoing debate. Our job is to make sure you understand precisely what was claimed, what wasn't, and what context didn't make it into the clip, so you're evaluating the actual argument, not just reacting to the most provocative 4 seconds of it. No cause of death has been confirmed in Nolan Wells' death. No charges have been filed. No allegation of misconduct against Judge Cole has been made public by any investigative body. What's real is a genuine, substantive debate about how much weight a parent's public defense of their child should carry, and that's a conversation worth having carefully, the same way we try to handle every part of this case. Subscribe if you want to be here for the next confirmed update.